Hi guys, I just want to come and just help us dive deeper into what God is doing here and through the scriptures. Today was a joy. I summarized basically all of Genesis in one sermon. And I know it sounds like a lot, but here's the focus. We get to see how do we trust God through the book of Genesis? How do we depend on Him? How do we rely on Him? And no matter the story. So in Genesis, first, start with the patriarchs, and that's why I took it. Abraham is showing us how to have unquestioned obedience. How do we remain obedient without questioning? And then we see in Isaac, we see this focus where Isaac is showing this acceptive passivity. He has this passive acceptance to whatever God says, he's going to accept, he's going to do. And it's just this passive approach. And then when it comes to faith, we see with Jacob, Jacob has this acknowledged dependency on God, no matter what he goes through. And that's what we're really focusing on today is Jacob and Joseph. We really looked at Jacob's life and says, how does he depend on God? His acknowledged dependency. And we see that in different ways. He depends on God's presence. He depends on all that God calls him to. He depends on God as he walks through different seasons of life. He depends on God through prayer. He depends on God even when he's facing just struggles with his brother. Like he clings to God, that shows a dependency on God. We see it in many different ways. And so it's a joy to watch Jacob's help us see what faith looks like and what faith includes. But then Joseph does the same thing as Jacob does for us. Joseph shows us another side of what faith includes. He shows this loyal faithfulness. And he shows it first by when you see he's hated by his brothers, he remains faithful to the Lord, this loyal faithfulness to God. And when nobody's watching, he remains faithfully loyal to God. When he's going through injustice, he remains faithfully loyal to God. And you see this over and over in his life until he gets to a point where he shows his faithful loyalty by trusting God's sovereignty. We see at the end of Genesis 50, verse 20, he reminds us of this like what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And so we've always asked this question like what is faith? Like what is really faith? And I think faith can be defined in this way. Faith is an abiding conviction that God would accomplish what he says. And I think you can take God out of that and still see that element happening. Because take for a moment, you sit in a chair, like you're relying that this chair, you're convinced that this chair is going to hold you up and it's going to keep doing what it says it's going to do. And it's the same thing. Like faith always has to do with the object of our faith. And so faith in God, saying we can abide, we have this abiding conviction that God is going to accomplish what he says. And I think what the patriarch shows us is how to live that abiding conviction out. Like having that unquestioned obedience, have that passive acceptance from Isaac, and then having from Jacob's life that acknowledged dependency, and then from Joseph's life having that loyal faithfulness. And I think that's what faith is. Like it has those elements into it to encourage you of how can I be faithful? Because Habakkuk 2:4 reminds us that the righteous will live by faith. And Paul says it again that the righteous will live by faith. And so, if that's a reality for those who call themselves believers in Christ, then our lives should live or should look like we have a life of faith. And I started the sermon in this way because, in basketball, we know a player not by their stats, but by the film. And so we watch the film as they play and we see the rhythms of what they do, and we can actually change the trajectory of their stats based on the film that we're watching them. We can know little techniques that they do or little things that they like to do very often, and in that we can actually hinder them from scoring or doing these things because we've watched film on them. And so when faith is lived out, it gets to a point where we get to demonstrate the faith that we have in God. And so my encouragement to you and my encouragement to us is that when we get to that final bema seat before Christ, my heart and desire is that as we watch the film of our lives, we can see the faith of what God has done through us because we put our trust and reliance in Him. So, my encouragement to you is to live this abiding conviction that He will accomplish what He says He will do. All right, enjoy and have a great day.